All right, everyone. So I wanted to talk about the whole Google Stadia that's being shut down. Google recently announced that they are going to kill off Stadia. And I've done a couple videos about Stadia. I've done a I believe I done a unboxing of the controller and and I remember making videos basically my issues with Stadia and concerns, and I actually made a follow up video basically defending my stance on it. And you know what? I was right. So, Google has officially announced recently that they are going to shut down Stadia in January 18th, 2023. And I'm not really all that surprised because let's just face it. And one thing I will say is to give props to Google about this. In terms of streaming services, because I've used almost all of them, in terms of latency and video quality, Google actually had the best one out there. You know, I do use Game Pass Ultimate, so I do use Xbox game streaming, and it's okay. But I think in terms of like the top ones out there, is either going to be Google Stadia or GeForce Now. And with now Stadia being shut down, I think there's a lot to learn from this. First and foremost, and I've said this before, game streaming needs to be treated more like a Netflix style service than something that you just buy games individually. And that was one of my biggest issues I've had with Stadia. The technology behind it was great, but in terms of the execution on how you use the service is really what killed it. Plus, Google does have a tendency of starting up things, and after a while, it doesn't work out, then they just kill it. So it's not all that surprising, honestly, that Stadia is going to be shut down. In terms of the consumer side, for the most part, basically any hardware and software that you purchased, Google will refund you. So, like in my case, I didn't really buy that much of anything. The controller I got was free because I was paying for YouTube Premium. And they were like, hey, you want a free controller just because you're a premium member? It's like, yeah, sure. Okay. I eventually sold it off. But yeah, I mean, I got the controller. I thought the controller was fine. It would be nice though, because the way this controller is designed is that it uses Wi-Fi to connect to the servers. Now you can use a wired connection like this picture here to like your smartphone, tablet, or your computer. So you can use it like a wired controller and it will just work, which is nice, you know, for like e-waste issues. What would be really nice though is if Google pushes out a firmware update because the controller itself does have Bluetooth, it's just they don't use it. It would be nice to release a new firmware that basically unlocks or changes the functionality to use Bluetooth so that you can use it as a Bluetooth controller for your phones and your computer so that at least you can continue using the controller. If they're going to just do absolutely nothing with it, I can see a lot of people just chucking this thing in the trash and just buying a different controller that they can use wirelessly. So that is a concern I have because, you know, for sustainability, it would be nice to use the controller wirelessly going forward. Now, one thing that I think other companies can look at here is game streaming has to be a service. They cannot they cannot have a service where you are pretty much forced to buy games a la carte. Now, there was Stadia Pro, but the problem is that for around the same price or for a couple dollars more a month, there are other services out there that you get access to hundreds and hundreds of games. Like Xbox Game Pass, if you do the ultimate version for $15 a month, not only you have access to all the the Xbox console library, but you also have access to the PC side of things, and of course the game streaming side of things. So you have several hundreds of games to choose from, and you can use it either on your computer, tablet, phone, Xbox consoles, and TVs now. And it seems like currently, out of all the major players, Microsoft is heavily investing into Game Pass to be the true Netflix for gaming. And that's another issue with Google Stadia is originally their messaging behind the service, because I was heavily following this. The biggest problem too is the way they were putting out the message wasn't very clear. I originally thought, oh, this is going to be like a service that you just pay either like a monthly fee, or there would be like a free tier version with ads, and then you just have access to games. If that honestly, that is something Google should have done. They should have been like, you know what? We want people to use the service. We want people to play. We want to be the absolute cheapest way possible to get into gaming. What better way than just do like the YouTube model, for example, where YouTube itself is free to use, but if you want extra niceties, if you want ad free, if you want better quality video, well, at least now with the recent announcement of YouTube putting 4K content behind premium, but which, to be honest with you, with you know what, that's going to be a separate discussion there. But like for game streaming, put it behind a paid wall for 4K game streaming. If you don't want ads, put that obviously behind a paywall. But it should have been, they should have had a free tier version where you have access to games that you can just play games on. But in return, you would be force-fed ads. Either ads while playing the game, or the game pauses temporarily and you watch an ad. And I think that is something, quite honestly, Google should have done in the first place. Because it's not like people aren't against paying for a service they like. You know, there's millions and millions of people that pay for Netflix, Game Pass, GeForce Now, and similar services out there, you know, in terms of gaming and video content. It's not that people aren't against paying for it. It's just Google could have had the opportunity to basically distinguish themselves of having a true free tier model to play games. Now, the closest thing right now, honestly, is going to be probably the closest thing that I can think of. Now, I could be wrong, but I think the only free option in terms of game streaming is going through Xbox to play Fortnite streaming through their cloud gaming service. But you can't use the Xbox, or you can't use the app. You have to go through the web browser. And I think that has to do with a contract that they have with NVIDIA with GeForce Now. I think that's why. I think that's like a loophole they got around. But Google had the opportunity to come out with a streaming service that would basically disrupt the gaming market. And in terms of investors early on, seeing Google coming in, it's like, well, geez, one of the most wealthiest companies in the world is getting to gaming. Yeah, Microsoft, Nintendo, Sony, and other companies out there that are in gaming, they should be worried. Unfortunately, while the technology side was awesome, the execution, the way Google handled it, was very, very piss poor. So, and yes, I am aware that the way Google announced it, they basically told no one until basically the day of, including people working in the Stadia division. They weren't even notified until a couple hours before news came out about Stadia being shut down. And it's unfortunate too, because there are developers that basically poured money and resources into developing games onto the service. So, as far as I'm aware of, the ones that were currently being developed, I haven't really heard anything in terms of what they're going to do, or if they're going to be compensated for their time or anything. But the way Google handled this basically seemed like they looked at the numbers and they were like, this is completely, we're not going to ever make money off of this. We are actually losing a lot more money than we realize. We just got to shut this down as soon as possible. And the fact that they're even refunding everyone's purchases. So like for me, I only bought one game, which was Guilt, which is actually one of the few exclusives. And just on the side note, the developers of that game recently announced that they are going to get that game onto other platforms next year. So at least that game itself is not going to be gone forever. So it's going to temporarily be unavailable until it comes out for other platforms. So most likely the three major console players. So, but yeah, all in all, it's kind of a shame because Google had an opportunity to basically distinguish themselves from everyone else out there, but they just couldn't. So what happens going forward then? After Stadia gets officially shut down? Well, there's other options out there. I think in terms of value, Game Pass Ultimate is going to be the best one out there. I hear mixed things on how Sony handles it, but I think in terms of like the top two right now is Game Pass and GeForce Now. So if you are someone that rather just buy games a la carte and want to have the option to stream your library of games, look at GeForce Now. You're not paying to play games or have access to games through NVIDIA. It's more that you're basically using their servers in the cloud to stream the games you purchased to you. So that's how GeForce Now works. I use GeForce Now. I'm actually a founder of them. So I only pay $5 a month, which fine. And I use it every so often. So yeah. Oh yeah. Microsoft declined a comment. I mean, what's Microsoft going to say? I mean, but yeah, it also shows you that even a large company like Google, in terms of getting into the gaming market, is so difficult now, because it's not like before where you can be a startup, start something, and that's it. And, you can start gaining traction. It's not like back in the day where, you have like small companies and then they eventually get bigger and bigger. Basically now, in today's market, you have to be a large company to pull this off. And even then, if you don't have the experience or if you don't have the right people running it, you're still going to fail. and it kind of shows you. And in some ways, it actually gives more. It gives more. I don't want to say respect, but it gives more confidence into the other major players out there that's been doing this for decades now. You know, like Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony. That, yes, it's very difficult to start a gaming division. I mean, look at Atari, for example. Atari used to be the biggest player in gaming back in the day. Now, where they're known for? Basically licensing the name and whatever properties they have to other companies to make like shirts and stuff. They technically do have a console called the Atari VCS, which I actually do have one, but they haven't really sold all that many. I'd be surprised they even sold even 20,000 of those things. Last time I heard, they only sold like maybe 10 to 15,000, and it's been out for a couple years. So, and look what happened with Intellivision. You know, they announced a console, and after a couple years, it basically turned out to be a complete scam of a console. So yeah, I think going forward in terms and you know what, it's kind of understandable too why Apple hasn't really done something like this. It's not that they don't have the money to do it, they certainly do. It's not like they don't have the technology to do it, because they certainly do. It's mostly because getting into the gaming market is completely different from anything else out there. And yes, I am aware of like Apple Arcade, and you know, Apple does make a crap ton of money. Same thing with Google, with their app stores, you know, on their phones, you know, like for game purchases, in-app purchases, and things like that. They do make a lot of money that way. But in terms of coming out with a gaming type service where you basically buy AAA games like this that you would typically have to buy a console for or have a high-end PC for, it's not that easy. And for people to use the service, whether you want to admit or not, you need to have exclusives to basically get people over to the service. I mean, look how Google handled it. They had an in-house development team to start making games for it. They had a couple of exclusives, but they basically killed all that stuff off. They closed all their in-house stuff down, and they were just going to concentrate on third-party stuff. And now they're just going to shut down the service, because guess what? Yes, having third-party support is important, but it's also just as important to have games exclusive to that platform. So it's kind of a shame, because I am one of those people that does like the idea of more competition is good. But at the same time, if you come out with something and people don't like it, people don't use it, well, why are you going to keep the service open? I do give Google credit, though, that they are going to refund almost everything you ever spend on the service. So for me, I'm eventually going to get a refund through Google, and that's fine. You know, I gave them a chance. I played one of the games, one of the exclusives, which was Guild. I thought it was okay. It wasn't like a mind-blowing game or anything, but, you know, I thought it was all right. But I'm going to get my money back, and I know for a fact when the game does eventually come out for other platforms, I will buy the game again, you know, just to give some support to the developer and to replay the game, of course. But yeah, I mean, I'm not shocked, but I'm also a little disappointed too. Mainly because I do want more competition out there. But at the same time, this type of model for game streaming obviously did not work. So, so yeah, maybe, I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? Um, I would like to know actually what will happen with the technology behind it. Because the technology behind it is actually really good. And hopefully that technology doesn't go to waste. Now maybe it is going to be one of those things where they shut this down and they basically reevaluate how they're going to reapproach it again in the future. We'll have to wait and see. But if they do relaunch it, most likely under a different name, but if they do relaunch a similar type of service, what they should do is basically what I said from the beginning. Make it a service where it's more like the YouTube model. You have the free version that's ad supported and things like that. And if you want to pay into it for no ads and things like that, or limited ads, they're going to have to figure that part out. But having something like that, just imagine if that somehow works, how much of a disruption that would be for the entire gaming market. Because then at that point, all you need is just a good internet service and probably a controller. But you didn't need a Stadia controller. You can use any controller you wanted. I mean, when I was finishing off Guild, I was streaming it through my NVIDIA Shield TV, and I was using the NVIDIA Shield controller, and it worked fine. So yeah, I'll end it here. It is kind of a shame it's being shut down because less competition, but at the same time, I'm really not all that surprised that Stadia is being shut down. So it is what it is. And hopefully other companies that are in the game streaming space, like Microsoft, Sony, Nvidia, Amazon, they will look at this like, okay, clearly this type of model did not work, so we're not going to do that. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in the future. But yeah, Google Stadia, not all that surprising. So it's going to go down into another Google service that was killed off. So I'll end it here. Like always, have a good one. Leave those comments down below. Like this video, share this video, subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And like always, have a good one. And if you've used Google Stadia, let me know in the comments down below on what games you've used it for and how was your experience. Because in my time of using it with Guild and a couple of other games actually, because when I got the controller, they also include like a month of Stadia Pro, so I was able to try other games on it. For the most part, it was pretty decent. Now, if you're talking about like fighting games, however, I probably wouldn't use Stadia for that or any game streaming service for that. But, for more casual types of games that are not like really responsive type games, I think game streaming is actually perfectly fine. But that's just me. Anyway, that's it. Like always, have a good one.